Every single ancient civilization on Earth believed in the same monster. They never met. They never spoke the same language. They lived thousands of miles apart. And yet, they all described the exact same creature. Today, we find out why. Let's start with the strangeness of it. In China, they called it Long, a divine serpent tied to rivers, rain, and the emperor himself. In medieval Europe, it was a fire-breathing beast that hoarded gold in mountain caves. In ancient Babylon, it was Tiamat, a monstrous dragon of primordial chaos. In Scandinavia, it was Jormungandr, a serpent so large it circled the entire world. And in Mesoamerica, it was Quetzalcoatl, a feathered serpent god. Different names, different continents. Zero contact between these civilizations, but strip away the details, and the pattern is identical. A massive reptilian creature, often winged, often linked to fire or water, almost always guarding something valuable, treasure, rain, or power itself. For centuries, historians brushed this off as coincidence. But the more you dig, the less that explanation holds up.
Here's where it gets interesting. Long before anyone understood what a dinosaur was, ancient people were already digging up their bones. In the Gobi Desert, near the trade routes used by ancient Greek travelers, lie the fossilized skeletons of a creature called Protoceratops, a beaked, four-legged animal with a large, bony skull frill. Folklorist Adrian Mayer spent years tracing how these exact fossils lined up with ancient Greek descriptions of the griffin, a lion-eagle hybrid guarding gold. The skull shape, the beak, the size, it's almost a perfect match. And it wasn't just the Greeks. In medieval China, large fossilized bones were regularly unearthed by farmers and builders, and instead of being labeled unknown extinct reptile, they were labeled exactly what made sense at the time: dragon bones. These bones were so widely believed to be dragon remains that they were ground up and sold as medicine in traditional Chinese apothecaries for centuries. In medieval Europe, whale skulls and mammoth skeletons were displayed in churches and town halls, presented as physical proof that dragons once roamed the land.
Think about that for a moment. These weren't hoaxes. People genuinely believed they'd found the bones of the monsters their grandparents warned them about, because without any concept of prehistoric life, that was the only logical explanation.
Fossils explain part of the myth, but they don't explain everything, because in some parts of the world, people didn't need old bones. They had living monsters. The Komodo dragon, a real species still alive today, can grow past 10 feet long, delivers a venomous bite, and was, for centuries, only known through second-hand sailor stories. To someone who'd never seen one, a first-hand account of a Komodo dragon sounds indistinguishable from a myth. Then there's the Nile crocodile. What's left is something very simple: real animals, big enough and dangerous enough, filtered through generations of storytelling, each retelling making the creature a little bigger, a little more dangerous, a little more magical.
So now we have an answer for what inspired dragons. But there's still a deeper question. Why did this myth form independently, again and again, in cultures with no contact with each other? The answer lies in what dragons actually represent psychologically. Across nearly every culture, dragons guard something: treasure, rain, the underworld, or forbidden knowledge. They sit at the boundary between order and chaos. A hero who defeats a dragon isn't just winning a fight. They're proving they can control the uncontrollable. This is why dragon-slaying myths appear in religious texts, royal propaganda, and children's folklore all at once. St. George slaying the dragon became a symbol of Christian virtue over evil. Chinese emperors used the dragon as a symbol of their own divine authority. The opposite approach, taming the dragon as a source of power rather than destroying it. Different conclusions, same core symbol. Because a giant, fire-linked, treasure-guarding reptile is simply the most natural monster the human imagination could build from the fossils, the predators, and the unexplained bones ancient people were already surrounded by. So if dragons were so deeply believed in, where did they actually go? The honest answer? Dragons didn't go extinct. They were explained away. As global exploration mapped nearly every corner of the planet by the 1600s and 1700s, there was simply no unexplored territory left for a dragon to hide in. Around the same time, the science of paleontology began to take shape. In the early 1800s, scientists like Georges Cuvier and Richard Owen started formally identifying fossilized bones as belonging to extinct prehistoric reptiles and coined the term dinosaur in 1842. For the first time in human history, there was a scientific explanation for the giant bones people had been digging up for thousands of years. And once that explanation existed, the dragon myth didn't need to explain them anymore. By the late 1700s, widespread belief in living dragons had almost entirely faded across Europe and much of Asia. Not because someone proved dragons didn't exist, but because something better came along to explain the evidence. Now here's where the myth meets modern pop culture, because the dragon story isn't just ancient history, it's still shaping entertainment today, and one of the biggest examples is House of the Dragon. The show itself is fictional, a fantasy series about a royal family whose power is built on dragons. We're not going to walk through the show's plot here. What's genuinely fascinating is what inspired it. The show's creator has spoken openly about drawing inspiration from real medieval history, particularly a period of English history known as the Anarchy, a brutal civil war in the 1100s fought over succession after King Henry I died without a clear male heir. His daughter, Empress Matilda, and his nephew, Stephen of Blois, spent nearly 2 decades fighting for the throne, a conflict that plunged England into chaos for a generation. Sound familiar? A kingdom torn apart by a succession crisis, rival claimants, and a fractured royal family? That's the real historical backbone underneath the fictional dragons. The other major influence is the Wars of the Roses, the 15th century conflict between the houses of Lancaster and York for control of the English throne. Shifting alliances, brutal betrayals, and a family destroying itself from within. All real events that inspired the fictional framework. So while the dragons themselves are fantasy, the human story, the power struggles, the betrayals, the cost of ambition, is built directly on real medieval history. In a strange way, that brings us full circle. A modern myth.
So let's bring it all together. Every culture on Earth believed in dragons. Not because dragons were real, but because the ingredients for the myth were everywhere. Dinosaur fossils nobody could explain, real predators large enough to be terrifying, and a psychological need for a symbol of chaos and power. As science advanced, the myth didn't die, it evolved. It moved from religion to folklore to the pages of fantasy novels to prestige television. The dragon never really left, it just changed shape, the same way it always has.
So, ancient memory? Misunderstood fossil? Or something we'll never fully explain? Let me know in the comments which theory you believe. If this kept you hooked till the end, hit subscribe, because next time we're uncovering. See you in the next one.